Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. I'm going immediately to my main issue, the migrant crisis, thoughts and concerns. But allow me to thank Mark Donfried and in his person, the ICD. The hyper-complexity of our time has been demonstrated for the last decades in various forms, shapes, and size. We must recognize that the cultural and democratic pluralism in which we live in enrich us as a person and at the same time as a community. But then again, that same diversity confronts us with challenges that not only we cannot ignore, but above all, challenge that we have to face. Otherwise, we put in danger the founding pillars of our community and our state. In recent years, Europe was witnessed a constant and increasingly high number of persons that, putting at risk their own lives, seek for themselves or for their families peace, shelter, and hope for a better present and a better future. Thousands, men, women, children, old people, have perished in their efforts to reach the Mediterranean shorelines. Others had the fortune to stay alive, just to end up in a camp where, not infrequently, the respect for their dignity as human beings is not present. Let us take a moment to realize what we are talking about when we are making a reference to human rights. As we know, the endless and massive use of a concept or a value or even a word means that after a while its intrinsic and real value is reduced to zero. That is to say, this is what happens when an important value or concept that represents a deep meaning proves to be indifferent, absolutely indifferent to the community. This is the notion of the decay by excessive use, or probably, in a more raw wording, decay by corruption or abuse of the concept. For varied reasons, the truest and complete meaning of human rights appears sometimes to be lost, leading to a kind of communitarian numbness, a certain kind of detachment from reality, only to find that these human rights, the fundamental building blocks of our society, are outrageously violated on our doorstep. A democratic and constitutional state, a state of rule of law, as we have heard before, founded under the rule of law, has, as I already mentioned, its core foundations in human dignity and human rights. This is the rationale that unities, believers and non-believers, liberals or conservatives, people of all genders, race, and opinions. Over the last years, the migration issues have been present in the concerns of those who, like us, have under our mandate or under our priorities the responsibility to reach the highest possibility state of well-being for the people. This means that the migration issues are not new. They have been existent in the borders of Europe in a very stressing way for a very long time. It is not difficult to recall the challenges faced, the challenges that still are being tackled by Greece, Italy, and Spain in the view of a massive pressures created by the necessity of receiving so many people that find in the Mediterranean route a way to a rich security. Unfortunately, for many people that took this risk, the journey at the maximum price, their lives. According to the United Nations report, we live in an era with the largest displacement of the people since World War II. In fact, all over the world, and those are numbers of the United Nations, more than 50 million people had to leave their homes or their countries of origin due to war, famine, disease, or other circumstances that put in danger their security and well-being. In this context, we can sustain that in present days, Europe faces what we can call a perfect storm. On the one hand, the proliferation of conflicts in the basin of the Mediterranean, in the Middle East, and in Africa led to a large displacement of people. On the other hand, Europe has not yet recovered from the financial, economical, and social crisis that shook its foundations. In addition, the recent and tragic events occurring in Paris, just for example, placed on top of the social and political agenda the subjects of security and the fight against terrorism. It is clear that the system that presently it is in place does not give the adequate answer to several key issues: preservation of life and respect for the human rights, for migrants, security, sustainability. Regarding the first, preservation of life and respect for human rights, it is impossible to overlook the fact that the lack of the legal entry channels to the European Union, even in the case of asylum seekers, has doomed those seeking to reach safety the very appetite of human traffickers. In most cases, the absurd irony of this is expressed in the fact that a simple and secure, I might add, and a simple airplane, boat, or train ticket is much less expensive than the price that people in extreme situation of need have to pay to someone that takes advantage of their situation. To address this issue, it is imperative that the European Union establishes strong links of cooperation with the United Nations and with third countries in order to combat human trafficking, providing safer and legal ways through which people can submit their case. Another key issue is security. In face of the chaos and the drama lived in presently in camp and in our borders, it is not possible to access in a secure and effective way all the claims of asylum. Failed. All the claims of asylum failed. It is quite paradoxical that those who more strongly contest the creation of human conditions to receive migrants and to assess their situation are the same ones who have the more security-focused speech. As we all know, chaos and disorder do not provide the adequate conditions to reveal the true motivation of a person. Finally, in regarding to sustainability, it is obvious that the international community needs to fight the root causes that are creating this large displacement of people, because otherwise, in my point of view, not only the problems will escalate, but also the resources needed to cope with them will be much higher. Issues like war and conflict, famine, terrorism, climate changes are redesigning the world map with consequences not fully yet known or even anticipated. For this reason, it is vital that Europe assumes a leading role in addressing these fundamental problems of our time and of our future. In the conclusion of this point of discussion, I would like to stress that it is almost self-evident that despite the complexity of Europe's challenge, the answer cannot be found in having a human rights approach to the issues underlying. The respect that we all must have for our common cultural heritage will provide us with better paths, better policies, and better strategies. Not only treat people with respect for their fundamental rights, but also to provide a more secure environment for all citizens. Assuming I myself, as the Ombudsman of Portugal, I assume the condition of national human rights institution. Now, assuming my condition of Ombudsman and at the same time the Portuguese National Human Rights Institution, allow me express my views on the role of these institutions may play in the work that all communities and all the states have to undertake to solve the pressing matter of migrations. The international community recognizes the National Human Rights Institution, accredited with a status, a key role in the effectiveness of national, regional, and international systems for the promotion and protection of human rights, recognizing them as an essential partner in international organizations. This importance is especially evident in the United Nations, where increasingly has been recognized a specific set of prerogatives that national human rights institutions have and may use in order to achieve a better standard of living for all citizens. In fact, the wide capacity of intervention, nationally, regionally, and internationally, combined with the essential features present in the creation of the Ombudsman institution and national human rights institutions, like their autonomy and independence. I stress autonomy and independence set a scenario that can prove to be very relevant in the shaping of new policies and practices. The work developed in close proximity with the people that reach our borders and suffer, and with non-governmental organizations that try to seize their pain, is extremely important to point out the failures of the system and to demand from the authorities a correct behavior that respects human rights. On the other hand, the regional and international representation provided to the Ombudsman and national human rights institution signifies that either individually or jointly, these independent state-based institutions have the possibility to encourage policymakers in having a human rights approach to these stressing issues. I conclude. In conclusion, I would like to end this little conference with a final thought, and, if I may, a strong appeal. It is true that we live in a time where the absolute many times takes over the rational reason regarding the complexity of life. Too many times the reactions or answers given to hard and dense questions are simply or simplistic, and therefore tend to be unfruitful, or even worse, tend to intensify the problems. It is crystal clear that the migrant crisis that Europa is facing will not be solved with the walls of barbed wire surrounding our borders. In my opinion, it is crystal clear that the security of our homes will not be obtained at the expense of crushing other people's or even our own fundamental rights. In face of so much pain, in face of the anguish of thousands and thousands of people fleeing war, hunger, and certain death, those like me who assume public and political responsibilities have to reaffirm by our actions the strong ethical commitment that is the anchor of our oath, that is the protection of human rights and the preservation of human dignity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ombudsman. We'd be happy to take one or two brief questions or comments. Please raise your hand if you'd like to pose a question or make a brief comment. Excellent, okay. And as always, if you could briefly introduce yourself, my colleague has a mic, and try to keep the questions brief, and then we can take both.
Yeah. I am Anuj Kumar from India. I have a very small question. Is there any problem with human rights approach to stable world order? Any limitations to human rights approach to stable world order?
And then if we can take one second question as well, and then you can offer a response to both, if possible.
My name is Kofi Jokoto from Ghana. My question is, who is a migrant? Who is a migrant, legal or illegal? And do they have a right? And if yes, what are their rights? Thank you.
May I begin with the last one? In my point of view, there is no illegal or legal migrants. They are all migrants. They are all legal migrants. The first question, perhaps I don't understand very well indeed, but as I point out, this organ of state is completely independent. It has no links to the government. It's completely independent. And we trust in the legitimacy of the parliament, as I have been elected by 2/3 of all the parliament. This is not one election of a simple qualified election, but a enforced election of 2/3 of all the deputies. And after that election, I'm completely independent. I cannot be put out. This is one of my best commitments, of ethical commitments to the people and to the defense of the human rights.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ombudsman, for the presentation and also for at least those brief responses. We are running late on time, so we do need to conclude there. But again, we very much appreciate your speech. If we could please express our sincere gratitude to the Ombudsman.